One day after the International Criminal Court recommended arrest warrants for both the leaders of Hamas and Israel, I sat down with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Here's our conversation. Mr. Prime Minister, we have a lot to get to, so let's get right to it. What is your response to the ICC seeking an arrest warrant for you?
Well, I think my response is no different from President Biden, who said this is outrageous, and many people across the political spectrum in the United States and leaders of democratic countries around the world have called it exactly that. It's a rogue prosecutor who's out to demonize the one and only Jewish state. And he's doing that by first applying a false symmetry. He's equating Israel's democratically elected leaders with the terrorist tyrants of Hamas. That's like saying, well, I'm issuing arrest warrants for, after 9/11, I'm issuing arrest warrants for George Bush, but also for Osama bin Laden. And in World War II, I'm issuing arrest warrants for FDR, but also for Hitler. Thanks a lot. That's a false symmetry, and it's totally absurd. It's a travesty of justice. But the other thing he's doing, he's using also, Stephanie, just this point, he's using also false accusations. He's saying we're drying out Gaza. Drying out Gaza? We're supplying now, before the war, 7% of Gaza's water, now 45% of the water, nearly half to make sure they have water. He's saying that we have a deliberate policy of starvation. Deliberate policy. We supplied 500,000 tons of food and drugs, 20,000 trucks.
Yes,
We're fixing the roadbeds so those trucks can go in.
But we've already heard U.S. aid has said famine is present. We've heard from Cindy McCain, who runs the World Food Program, who has said there's massive famine there. Are you saying that they're lying?
I'm saying that Cindy McCain, unfortunately, is misinformed, and I'm saying that the facts prove otherwise. We flooded Gaza with humanitarian aid, but before that, we supplied it with more than minimal amounts. And we fixed the roadbeds, we fixed the border crossings to make sure that all this food and all these supplies go in. We've enabled airdrops, we've enabled maritime routes, we're building a port there. The whole thing of a deliberate starvation policy is ridiculous, and it's put forward by a guy who doesn't check his facts. He's receiving it, as do others, from the UNRWA and other anti-Israeli agencies and from Palestinian sources. Look, they said just recently that they discovered that, well, they sort of were misinformed, that 10,000 casualties that were supposed to be women and children, now they say, well, we don't know that. I mean,
sir,
so they're fixing it. You know, it takes time for the truth to come out.
We can't discount that there has been massive suffering and deaths. We see it with our own eyes. But of course, the reason we're all here is because of what happened on October 7th, because of the hostages that are still being held. So let's talk about the path forward, because President Biden says that your failure to plan for who will govern Gaza has already allowed Hamas to pop back up in parts of Gaza. The IDF is now saying they're fighting Hamas again in northern Gaza. Why should the world believe that anything will be different after you go into Rafah, which will obviously cause more suffering?
Well, first of all, the suffering is something that we're concerned with, and Israel has gone to lengths that no other government and no other army in modern urban warfare has gone to prevent civilian casualties. For us, every civilian casualty is a tragedy. For Hamas, every civilian casualty is a strategy. They're trying to keep them in harm's way while we're trying to get them out of harm's way with millions of leaflets, phone calls, text messages, and so on, and largely succeeded. But of course not, it's not perfect. It's obvious. But we do our best, and therefore we're held to a standard that no other army has been held to in history. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, in order to finish this, we have to eliminate the terrorist army, and 4 of its battalions, of its 24 battalions, are in Rafah. When we eliminate them, we'll be able to also get an alternative governance in Gaza. That's my goal, to eliminate Hamas, to ensure demilitarization of Hamas, and bring in Gazans who are not threatened anymore by Hamas and do not share its goal of destroying Israel, to run the civilian administration. And the third thing would be to rebuild Gaza along peaceful lines with the help of moderate Arab states. That's a practical plan. But Stephanie, it goes through victory. None of these plans have any meaning if you do not eliminate Hamas. And if we eliminate Hamas, then I think that Peace is possible, prosperity is possible, the expansion of peace is possible. But we need to defeat Hamas and bring our hostages back home. They go together. We've already brought half of them back, and we'll bring the other half back. This is my goal, and this is what the vast majority of Israelis support.
And of course, the idea of peace is extraordinary, but the path to get there has been devastating. So I want to talk about the power of Hamas. Back in December, the New York Times reported that you encouraged payments to Hamas from Qatar shortly before the October 7th attack. Did you underestimate what Hamas was capable of doing?
Well, first of all, I did everything in my power to degrade Hamas's military power. I led 3 major military operations against Hamas, which eliminated about 6,000 of their fighters and some of their key leaders, but it didn't root them out. And I think what we're trying to do now is root them out, not have them resurge again, come back out of Rafah with their 4 battalions, retake the Gaza Strip, and then do what they vowed to do, to repeat the horrible October 7th massacre of raping women, beheading women, burning babies, taking hostages. They want to do it over and over again. We can't let them do it. As far as the money that was given to them, it was given to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe, to make sure that the water pumps work, that the sewage pumps work, the electricity works. That was the goal. But we did everything in our power to degrade their military power. Now we want to root them out and get a civilian administration that is not beholden to them and is not beholden to the idea of destroying Israel. That's the way forward.
That was the goal, sir. That was the goal. But October 7th happened, and now you're in a full-blown war. So did you underestimate what Hamas was capable of?
Well, we certainly were surprised on that day. There's no question about that. But we got back on our feet immediately, and we're driving Hamas out. We're doing it in the most difficult urban warfare conditions of modern times, because they have 35,000 terrorists in a dense urban area, 50 meters above ground, 50 meters in a terror tunnel system of 500 kilometers of terror tunnels. And it's enormous. And I think they underestimated the fact that we could take them out once we turn things around. And we are. And we're committed to doing it, to finish it. It's not easy. We're getting a bum rap in the international scene. I mean, you have this travesty where the leaders of Israel are being called war criminals. When we're fighting war criminals, we're fighting these genocidal Hamas monsters. And then a court that was set up to prevent the repeat of the Holocaust genocide and other such savageries is accusing Israel of such crimes. It's absurd. But, we have to, we have to fight it. The way we fight it is by fighting and winning, and we will.
Are you to blame for that bum rap? For 70 years, the Democratic Party in the United States, for the most part, was in lockstep with Israel until about a decade ago. Some Democrats blame you for that rift. What do you say to them?
Well, first of all, I value the bipartisan support, which is still quite substantial, and I think it's a mainstay of our policy, our national interest and our policy. Mind you, 80% of Americans, according to the Harvard-Harris poll, it's a tracking poll, and it's serious, and it shows that 80% of Americans identify with Israel and not with Hamas in this conflict, and that cuts across party lines. So that's very important. Now, it's true that there is a fringe element and the progressive fringes of the Democratic Party that doesn't identify with Israel. By the way, doesn't identify that much with America. And some of these people, support the demonstrations on the campuses. What do they chant on the campuses? They say, death to America, death to Israel. They burn American flags. And I think on the whole, this is not the Democratic Party. This is not the Republican Party. These are not the independents. This is not mainstream America. So mainstream America identifies with Israel. It's very important for me that they continue to do so, but it's got nothing to do with me. It's got a lot to do with them, where they're going, how they see the world. Most Americans understand one thing, that Israel and America stand for common values, for individual liberty, for individual rights. It doesn't make any difference if you're white or black or gay or straight or Israeli or Arab. You have individual human rights, but you also have the right of national protection and security. People understand that, they value that. They see Israel as part of America, and America as part of Israel, part of that same civilization. It hasn't changed. change. But for some people, they see it differently because they see America differently. So they see Israel differently. And I have to tell you, that doesn't represent the broad spectrum of American opinion. And as far as I'm concerned, maintaining this broad bipartisan support is an integral part of our policy, and we'll continue to do everything we can to keep it.
Well, you've had a very special relationship with Donald Trump, with his family. NBC News is reporting that you are currently engaged in close conversations with Trump's team. Can you confirm that?
I'm engaged in close conversations with President Biden's team, with former President Trump's people, anybody who comes here, Democrats, Republicans, every day, including, by the way, yesterday. You had Republicans and Democrats come here, and, how should I say this? I'm an equal opportunity visitor and visited, and it's something that conforms to the basic policy that I said. I want to make sure that the broad spectrum of American policy is supports Israel, and that we're open to them, hear their concerns, but also let them hear our concerns. And I think that's the only productive policy. So I meet with everyone, and I'll continue to do so. When was the last time you spoke to former President Trump or his son-in-law, Jared Kushner? I saw Jared Kushner, I think 6 months ago, a few months ago. Former President Trump sent me a note when I won the elections, but we haven't spoken since. Again, I appreciate the support both of President Biden, what he said yesterday about this farce in the international court issuing warrants against the Prime Minister of Israel, the Defense Minister of Israel. I think when he said it's more than outrageous, it's outrageous, he's right. And I appreciate the support that he's given us from the beginning of the war. Let me tell you, I also support and appreciate the support that I received from President Trump, that Israel received, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, declaring Jerusalem as our capital, recognizing our sovereignty over the Golan Heights. I think these are all important things. That's the continuity that I'd like to see continue.
My thanks to Prime Minister Netanyahu for his time. Susan and John still with me. Susan, what was your take on what he said his relationship with both the current and former president are?
Well, look, there have been a lot of tensions. They have been rising, I would say, between the Biden administration and Prime Minister Netanyahu. He tried very hard not to really give an impression of that. But remember, there have been warnings from the president, even public warnings from the very beginning of Israel's response to that horrific terrorist attack on October 7th. I remember very vividly President Biden going there and saying, do not overreact. Do not make the mistake that we made after 9/11. Be careful in how you prosecute this war. And I think it's a lot of ignored warnings, brushed aside warnings from the United States and others that has led to this unfortunate moment of the ICC charges against Netanyahu as well as Hamas. And I think that that's one thing he's reacting to. As far as Donald Trump, I thought it was very interesting to see Prime Minister Netanyahu squirm a bit, frankly, to your question, Stephanie, because actually, while Republicans have been staunchly, loudly, vocally over the top in their uncritical support for Israel in this conflict, Donald Trump personally has a real beef with Netanyahu after giving him an enormous amount of support during his presidency, practically outsourcing American policy to Israel and to Netanyahu. Trump was very mad at Netanyahu. Why? Because he recognized the election of Joe Biden and congratulated Joe Biden in November of 2020. For Trump, everything is personal, and that includes foreign policy.